This video is sponsored by From the Feywild. Hello everybody, and welcome to Kelly Arts. I recently taught a small class on how to make this beautiful stained glass star, which I will be sharing with you today. On the screen is a list of all the tools that I'll be using. Pause the video if you want to take notes on what you would need for yourself. This project was actually done at my friend Kat's studio for her store, From the Feywild. From the Feywild is a queer-owned small business that specializes in handcrafted fantasy couture and tabletop RPG accessories. With 3 styles of skirts to choose from, you're sure to find something you'll love. Their sizing is inclusive, and so is their brand. Whatever your body type, gender identity, or gender expression, From the Feywild is here to meet your needs. They also carry a line of handcrafted tabletop RPG accessories, including resin dice vaults and trays, dice bags, and more. Custom orders are also greatly welcomed. Find From the Feywild on Etsy, Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon, or at a convention near you. Thank you, Kat, for sponsoring this video. The pattern, bought on Etsy, was resized to the desired dimension ahead of time, and the individual pieces were given a unique number. The second copy is retained with the same numbers for keeping track of the pieces and later positioning everything. I used the pattern shears initially to make a cut, in order to demonstrate that this tool is actually making 2 parallel cuts and leaves a bit of paper between. This is useful for when cutting interior lines, to compensate for the foiling tape which will be going around each piece of glass. This is known as the Tiffany style of stained glass, and does not have the heavy lead caming that big church windows are known for. I used regular scissors to cut out all the exterior lines, cutting along the inside of the black lines. Once done, I'll use the pattern scissors to cut out all the interior lines. After all the pattern is cut out, the desired color and pattern of glass is selected and assigned to each piece. If more than one piece is being cut from the same glass, you need to make sure that each piece has enough clearance as to not interfere with the others. Care is given to make sure that the grain of the glass is consistent throughout the final piece. Each piece is held in place and outlined with a Sharpie. The numbers are marked as well. The glass cutter I use is self-oiling, which makes it convenient, as otherwise it would need to be manually oiled between each cut. I anchor my wrist, put firm downward pressure on the cutter, and follow the outside of the marked lines. It's important to remember to not go over the same line twice with the glass cutter, as it'll damage the wheel. Once the line is scored, I use the running pliers to apply even force on either side of the line to break the piece free. If the glass does not break along the entire score, use breaking pliers to snap off the remaining pieces. Eye protection is important, as this kind of break can easily send tiny fragments of glass upward. The edge of the glass will be touched up with a grinder later to remove sharp edges and to hone in on the desired shape. Cutting it a bit larger than desired is your goal, as cutting inside the line or exactly to shape will leave your piece small. We start by cutting off as much as we can, going straight across the points. Then we will score successive shallow lines along the concave area, nibbling out what we can until we either achieve the cut we want or are satisfied we can grind out the last of it without taking all day. Holding the glass firmly in one hand, use the pliers to grab the glass up to the score, not over it, and gently pull downwards until it snaps. Straight lines are obviously the easiest to cut in a single go. Outside or convex curves will sometimes break in a single attempt, but will often need more work depending on how tight the curve is. Inside or concave curves are a challenge. A severe concave shape will likely need to be removed with a grinder, as the cutting process could easily snap off pieces you want to retain. Clean your workspace thoroughly. It is likely to have very fine glass shards all over. Use something disposable for cleanup. Damp paper towels are effective for table and chairs, and something like a Swiffer mop is good for floors. Oh yeah, this is nice. We set up the grinder on the patio outside the studio to avoid a mess in Kat's workspace. For grinding, the machine will have water added to a basin to lubricate the glass and to minimize powdered glass flying into the air. That being said, the machine will often eject droplets of water which contain powdered glass, so wear eye protection. Also, ear protection is a good idea, as it is a somewhat loud process, and if you have a lot to work on, your ears will get quite tired. And really, gloves would be ideal too, as the edges of glass can be razor sharp, and powdered glass in your skin isn't fun either. To grind each piece, lie the glass flat on the surface, and apply firm pressure against the spinning grinding wheel. Make slow, careful passes along each surface, until the Sharpie line is completely ground away. Unfortunately, the water on the glass can make the marker lift off, so after much processing time, it's not uncommon to have your line largely washed away. This is where the second copy of the original pattern comes in. I put it under a piece of sheet glass I had brought along to keep it from getting soaked. Then I periodically place the piece I am producing onto the pattern to see what it produced. Remembering, of course, to compare the area inside the lines of the pattern. Do this to all the pieces. Wash off all the finished pieces and dry them thoroughly before the next step. Clean your work area like I had mentioned before to make sure all the powdered glass is taken care of. Do not rub your eyes for any reason until you are certain you are clear of powdered glass. Ask me how I know. Each piece of glass will be wrapped in copper foiling tape along the cut edges. The tape is sticky on one side and typically covered with a waxy paper backing, which is removed as you work. The foiling is started usually near a corner, with the tape being centered so that there is an even overlap on both sides. The centering is very important for pieces that will be visible from either side, as most projects are. Continue wrapping the piece, pulling up and reapplying the tape as needed to make it even, until you reach the starting point. Cut or tear the tape so there will be enough to overlap the starting point. Now push down the sides of the tape all around the piece. On convex edges, the copper will crinkle a bit as it's being folded. This won't show on the final piece, so that's fine. On concave edges, the copper will need to stretch a bit, as the nature of curves is to get bigger. The copper is fairly ductile, so it'll stretch, but care is needed to keep it from tearing. I'll generally start folding from the center and move to the edges. If the tape does tear, a smaller piece of foil tape can be added over the tear and cut into shape with an X-Acto knife or a scalpel. Once all the edges are folded down, we use a burnisher to rub down the tape, smoothing down all the wrinkles and forcing the tape to have good contact with the glass. This process can be very satisfying work and can be done while watching TV or Kelly Arts videos. Put each piece on your copy of the pattern and make sure they all fit snugly. If you notice any issues with fit, like something is misshapen or is too large, this is your last chance to correct it. Simply strip off the tape and take the piece back to your grinder to make any adjustments needed. If it's too misshapen, you're simply going to have to start over with that piece from scratch. This is the exciting part, as we get to deal with fire. Okay, not fire, but a fair amount of heat. This will need to be done in a well-ventilated space, due to the fumes being given off. I have a board made from the back of a fire-resistant ceiling tile. I highly recommend something like this, as it is not going to catch fire and is soft enough that I can tack into it. I secure the pattern onto the board, and then position each piece on the pattern, and use metal pins to lock it into place. Small nails or carpet tacks or sewing pins can be used if you don't have pins like this. Basically, anything that won't melt and will prevent your piece from moving around. Once you're satisfied with the position of everything, apply flux to all the copper surfaces. Solder will act as a binding agent for the project, and the flux will allow the solder to flow across the copper and into all the little places. The solder I use is 50% lead, so definitely make sure you're not breathing it in. We're back outside onto the patio and using a fan to blow the fumes from the working area. Needless to say, anything made with the lead solder is not considered food safe. You can buy lead-free solder, found typically in the plumbing section of most hardware stores. and it is a viable alternative. But I have found that the lead flows better and makes for a nicer finished product. To start with, and periodically through the process, you'll want to clean your soldering iron. I'll let you Google the proper way of doing that, as it's been quite a while since I had used it, and I'm sure I'm not doing it right here on camera. I'm just putting a little bit of the solder on the back side of the soldering iron.
And letting it run down.
Ideally, you should have like a little, see how it's flat here?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want that. You want a little
ridge.
So you can always come back and add a little bit more.
And solder follows heat. Is the important way to remember of any type of soldering.
And if you get like a blob you don't like, you can always just touch it with the soldering iron.
And yeah, this is the part that she makes look like so much easier than it is.
Until she's had practice.
Mm-hmm.
You can get bubbles showing up in the solder. That's just from escaping gases, just remelted. Once the initial seams on the front side of the piece are done, remove the tacks to coat the sides with flux. When you remove the tacks, they'll have gotten quite warm with conducted heat. Flux the sides to get them ready to solder. This process is called tinning and is used to make the tape on the piece all the same color. So you want to hold it so that the flat ends of the soldering iron are up and down.
Okay.
This you're just following the line. You're just coloring at this point.
Okay. Because it's not.
Because it's not structural at all.
The structural part is all where it touches.
Make sure you get it on the sides too. Flip over the piece to do the back. I made a ring out of copper wire that I'll be using to hang the piece on my window. This also gets fluxed and tinned. Okay, now the third hand trick. Nothing on my sleeves.
Presto!
Using a piece of glass as support, I soldered the ring onto one of the points of the star on the back side. When doing the seams in the back, don't linger too long with the soldering iron at any given point. This can actually melt the front solder, and that'll soften and pick up the texture on whatever it's lying on. If this happens, just reflow the solder to get a nice ridge again. When the back is done, go over the whole piece to correct any spot where the solder is built up or you missed. Usually, the excess can be gathered onto the tip of the iron and then flicked away. Doing this, however, can leave little solder balls in your workspace. You can use a damp paper towel to gather them all up to properly dispose of the waste. Allow your piece to cool, as all the soldered seams will still be hot for a while, as will be the glass. Clean up all the solder with a scrub brush and a grease-cutting soap like Dawn. The flux, especially along the solder lines, will be stubborn, but you don't want any to remain as it's greasy and it doesn't smell the best. You may find little balls of solder have stuck themselves onto the glass. These can easily be removed with the tip of an X-Acto knife or scalpel. If desired, there are chemicals that can be purchased that will give the solder a patina, like black or even coppery, if that's the look that you want. It had been a long day, but everyone in my class, all three of us, were pretty happy with the results. I hope you enjoyed the class as well. Let me know if you want more videos like this one, where I'm actually showing you how to actually make the project, instead of just simply watching me do it. Thanks everyone for watching. Check me out on social media and on Patreon, and make sure you check out Cat's shop, link in the description. See you in the next one.